Emma woke up slowly, stretched and yawned. Casting her eyes about, she gasped delightfully and watched in growing wonder as a spectrum of orange and red cast its rays into her room. In joyful wonder, she noticed the beautiful sunrise coming from the window and sighed happily and sat up. She loved it when the day began like this. It brought promises of a terrific day ahead. She looked around her room and smiled. It was a beautiful room, and every morning she woke up in it, she looked at it like she was seeing it for the first time. The walls were done in sparkling white, and the floor was covered in grey and white tiles. Her ivory-carved dressing mirror was at one corner, while the white leather couches were at another. Her duvet matched her floor. She got up from the bed and stretched again, breathing in the sweet fresh air, exhaling slowly and lingeringly. This is what it feels like to be young, independent and successful, she sighed happily. She was only 26 and already she had her own thriving business, a clothing line that was gaining popularity by the day. She moved to the window as if the sunrise called out to her. She wanted a closer look at the beautiful orange bloom. She had learned to sew on her father's lap. He started the Emma collections, but he died before he could see it become successful. She sighed unhappily at the thought. She pushed the bitter memories from her mind as she pushed herself away from the window and picked up her small watering can and went to water her plant. She had bought the plant thinking she could start a garden, but the demands of her work didn't allow her time for such luxury. As she watered it, she noticed the single rose standing in a glass jar next to the plant. Dropping the kettle, she picked up the rose and carried it to the mirror. The rose was given to her by one of her numerous admirers. She wasn't ready for the kind of commitment he was demanding. At 26, she still had time to get into a well-meaning relationship, she thought ruefully. Now was the time to take her business higher. The sky was her beginning. She was going to create designs that would put her clothing line on the world's map, and she was going to diversify into other credible ventures. She climbed into the oval-shaped bathtub. She didn't think a brief shower would satisfy her. She sighed with satisfaction as she breathed in the scent of the bath gel. Moments later, she was standing in front of the mirror and examining herself. She looked at her tiny waist and flat stomach. Her waist looked like someone had carved out a U at both sides, and this enhanced her well-rounded hips. She was not very tall, but she made up for that in other areas. Her face was small and oval, with large slanted eyes the color of hazel. People usually thought she wore contact lenses. Her nose was small and pointed, and her lips were full and luscious. She sat down on her stool to apply her makeup. Her face didn't really need much makeup, but she liked to indulge herself sometimes. Her foundation, mascara, and lip gloss were all she needed on her face. When she was done, she stood up and walked into her vast and very rich closet and put her hands on her hips, trying to make up her mind on what to wear. She smiled and extracted a black bodycon skirt and topped it with a black wrap jacket. She wore black high-heel shoes and bags and marched to the mirror to get another look at her appearance. She ran her hands through her waist-length blonde hair that matched her eyes perfectly and decided to let them run free. She came out of her room and walked inside the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. The tiles on her wall were brown and white. The combination made you think of delicious meals. She had all the latest gadgets a kitchen should boast of. She had taken her time in doing up her kitchen because when she cooked, she liked to indulge herself. She poured herself a large amount of orange juice and placed some fruits in her plate. Mma came out of her kitchen and picked up her car keys from the living room. Her car was a brand new Mercedes truck. It was one of those extravagant purchases made to keep up appearances, especially with her clients and investors. But this was one extravagant purchase she never regretted. She reversed swiftly and left the bungalow behind. A very pretty girl, smartly dressed in navy blue trouser suit, walked into a very well-furnished, masculine bedroom. She folded her hands across her chest and smiled with relief. The relief slowly turned to mischief as she looked at the hunk of a man sleeping soundly in the center of a wide bed, looking quite peaceful. One of his muscular hands was beneath his head, while the other one lay across his well-muscled stomach. The man possessed a very unique face, fair and handsome. No wonder women fell all over themselves to get him to notice them. The girl smiled warily. It didn't help that he was Uche Okoha, a billionaire and the richest bachelor in town. She watched him sleep quietly and knew that many women wished to see him this way. The man had kept her waiting. If she had not discovered him that morning, she would still be wondering if he was yet back from his business trip to attend her party. His presence was especially important to her because she was getting married to one of his best friends, and it had taken him a lot of time to come to terms that she, his little sister, was getting married to his friend. He had nearly killed Charles when he learned of their romance earlier in the year. It was a tough battle to convince him otherwise. Being certain that he was home and would be attending the engagement party, there was another thing she wanted for him. She wanted her brother to be as happy as she was, and that meant finding a way to make him stop seeing the rich spoilt brat, Angela. She leaned forward and kissed him on the cheeks briefly and smiled as he woke up confused. Uche opened his eyes slowly. He was sure he went to bed alone last night. Of course he did. His private jet didn't touch down till the early hours of the morning, and he was so tired that all he thought about was bed and sleep. His sister, he suddenly realized. She was so scared that he was still bitter and might boycott her engagement party. He stretched and smiled so like her to come and find out firsthand if he was really trying to avoid her party. He opened one of his eyes and saw her and smiled again. "How do you get any work done if it takes you this long to wake up?" she said, and let out a screech as he dragged her down the bed and tickled her. She laughed and begged him to stop. He stopped and she scrambled away from him. "What are you doing here, brat?" he asked, lying back down to catch his breath. "To see if you would dare miss my party. I already gave you my promise." "I was a little worried you might change your mind considering she trailed off. "I have totally forgiven Charles for loving you." He smiled at her and got up from the bed. He was wearing deep blue boxers which showed off his athletic body. "I thought you slept in the nude," she teased him. "Aren't we lucky I was too tired to shed all my decency?" "Well, you are lucky it was just me. You could have been one of your girlfriends. And which of the companies do you think a man would prefer early in the morning? Even if the woman is Angela?" she asked because she wanted an opening for her mission. "So tell me, apart from making sure I would be at your betrothal party, what else brought you here?" She hesitated for a moment. "I came to tell you I want you to bring a woman other than Angela to my party." He raised his eyebrows at her. "Really? And why do you suppose I would be bringing her?" "She told me so. She's not the kind of woman you should be thinking seriously about." "I am thinking seriously about her. It amazes me how you seem to know more about what goes on in my mind than I do," he said. "She has become your permanent escort for months now. You attend every function with her," she complained. "You told me so, not long ago, that your private life is none of my business, and they say respect is reciprocal." "Except this is my party, and I don't want to get angry for 1 second, and I seem to grow angry every time I see Angela." "And if I insist on bringing her, then I would know that contrary to what you say, you have not forgiven Charles and I, and you are bringing Angela as a form of revenge." Her reasoning was too ridiculous, and he began to laugh. "I am glad Charles has taken you and your troubles out of my hands. I will see you at the party with a new date. Do you by any chance know how and where I might come up with one at this short notice?" Eva smiled mischievously. "You are Uche Okoha." She closed the door after her. Uche heaved a sigh of relief and began to march towards the bathroom, thinking which of the many girls he knew could serve as his date. Then suddenly he saw her face, the hazel-eyed witch, who had been haunting his dreams ever since he had the misfortune of setting his eyes on her. and each time he did, she was escorted by a different man. He didn't want to become the victim of a scheming beautiful woman. Was he not trying to escape Angela? But something inside him believed that the Hazel Eye Goddess was different, and it was time he found out how different.